My name is Clara Hughes, and I'm 32 years old. On paper, I'm a successful graphic designer with my own studio in Chicago. But in my family, I have always been the invisible middle child, the one who could never measure up. Last Christmas, as we sat around the dinner table, my mother, Eleanor, looked me straight in the eyes and said the words that had been implied for years: "You are the most useless child we have." Everyone froze. That was when I finally stood up for myself. Before we go on, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's a free way to support my work and help me share emotional stories like this one. Growing up in suburban Milwaukee, I always felt like an extra in the movie of my own family. My older brother, David, was the golden child from day one. He was tall, athletic, and charming with a natural talent for sports that made him the pride of our small community. Every weekend, our parents would drive for hours to watch his football games, cheering from the stands while I sat beside them with a book, trying to stay warm and entertained. I remember one crisp autumn Saturday, huddled in the bleachers of a small-town high school, the scent of hot dogs and wet grass in the air. David, a quarterback, threw the winning touchdown pass in the final seconds. My mother leaped to her feet, screaming his name, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated joy. My father clapped him on the back later, a rare show of open affection. His trophies lined the living room mantel, and dinner conversations revolved around his latest accomplishments or upcoming games. My older sister, Rachel, was the perfect daughter, embodying all the traditional values my mother held dear. Rachel got married at 23 to her high school sweetheart, had her first child at 25, and settled into the role of a devoted wife and mother with apparent ease. My mother would constantly reference her during our phone calls. "Rachel made the most amazing pot roast for her in-laws yesterday," she'd say, her voice dripping with pride. "Rachel is redecorating the nursery all by herself. She is so creative." Then there was Lily, the baby of the family, 7 years younger than me. From the moment she was born, she was coddled and protected. Every whim was catered to without question. Even when she dropped out of her first college program, it was dismissed as finding herself. I recalled her maxing out her first credit card on a non-refundable trip to Cancun with her friends. My parents paid it off without a second thought. My own mistakes, no matter how small, were met with lectures on responsibility and self-reliance. And then there was me, Clara, caught in the middle. I was neither the athletic star, the traditional daughter, nor the baby who needed protection. I was quiet and creative, spending hours drawing and designing, lost in my own world of colors and shapes. My report cards were filled with A's and B's, but they were never celebrated like David's game scores. My art won school competitions, a first-place ribbon for a watercolor landscape, an honorable mention for a charcoal portrait, but those certificates never made it to the refrigerator door alongside Lily's finger paintings. My mother's approval was rare and often came with a backhanded comment, like, "Your apartment looks nice, but it must be so lonely living alone at your age." My father, Henry, a quiet man who worked as an accountant, seemed to care but lacked the courage to stand up to my mother. During particularly harsh criticisms, he might offer a mild, "Now, Eleanor," but would quickly retreat if she turned her sharp tongue in his direction. Occasionally, he would slip me encouraging notes, scribbled on the back of his business cards and slipped into my jacket pocket when he thought no one was looking. "Proud of you, honey," one read. Another simply said, "Keep creating." It was a tiny lifeline of support in a sea of indifference. The pattern of unequal treatment became most apparent during significant life events. When I graduated from college with honors in graphic design, neither of my parents attended the ceremony. My mother had a garden club meeting she couldn't possibly miss, and my father claimed a work emergency. I sat alone during the ceremony, a dark, empty space on the bench beside me, watching other families celebrate together. A young woman next to me hugged her beaming parents, her younger siblings taking photos. I imagined the family dinner they would have, the toasts to her future. My own future felt as hollow as that empty seat. Even family photos told the story of my outsider status. In the large portrait hanging in my parents' living room, David and Rachel stood directly behind our seated parents. Lily perched on our mother's lap while I was positioned slightly to the side, as if I had been added as an afterthought. Year after year, holiday after holiday, the pattern continued. My achievements were minimized. My presence was often an inconvenience. Despite all this, a part of me still yearned for their approval. I kept showing up, kept trying, kept hoping that someday things would change. But as the years passed, that hope grew thinner, stretched nearly to its breaking point. The burden of unseen success, what my family failed to see, or perhaps chose not to see, was that I had built a life I was proud of. Piece by Careful Piece. My career in graphic design had not been an easy path, but it had been a fulfilling one. After graduating from college, I started at a small design agency, making barely enough to cover rent and student loans. The first 2 years were especially tough. I faced rejection after rejection from larger agencies and clients. I remember one creative director, a slick man in an expensive suit, looking at my portfolio with a condescending smirk. "This is a nice little hobby, but it's not real work," he said, pushing my book back across the table. I lived on ramen and coffee, the cheapest brand of both, investing what little extra money I had in better design software and a second-hand Wacom tablet. By my 28th birthday, I had saved enough to rent a small commercial space, a former laundromat with peeling linoleum and a faint smell of bleach, and officially launched my own studio, Hughes Design Works. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine, built from nothing but hard work and determination. The turning point came when I landed a contract with a regional craft brewery called Copper Kettle Alesh. My pitch, a series of vintage-inspired label designs that told a story of the brewery's history, resonated with the owners. The campaign was a massive success, earning industry recognition at a regional marketing gala. That one success led to others, and within 2 years, my client list included 3 national brands. My work was featured in design publications like Print and Communication Arts, and my studio was now generating over $500,000 in annual revenue. Financially, I was more secure than anyone in my family knew. My personal life had also taken shape. I had been dating James for nearly 3 years, a kind and supportive architect I met at a design conference. He was everything my family wasn't: consistent, honest, and truly invested in my happiness. While we weren't rushing toward marriage, we had built a solid relationship based on mutual respect and shared values. James understood my family situation and provided the emotional support I had always lacked at home. "Your success is your own," he would tell me. "You don't need their validation." I also had a close circle of friends, including my best friend, Chloe, who lived in the same building. I had also developed interests that brought me joy, like taking pottery classes at a local studio and volunteering monthly at a youth art program, teaching kids the fundamentals of design. Yet, despite all these accomplishments and the full life I had created, there remained a hollow ache inside me. I still longed for my family's approval, which led me to become their unofficial financial safety net. It started small with a loan to my father for car repairs, a new radiator for his 2008 Ford Focus, and help with Lily's college tuition after she decided to try a new program. The most significant support went to my brother, David, who, despite his outward appearance of success, had made a series of poor financial decisions. He was a natural charmer, a gifted salesman, but he was terrible with money. 3 years ago, he came to me in desperation, his face pale and drawn. He had overextended himself on a new house and investments that went bust, facing potential bankruptcy and the loss of his home. "Clara, I hate to ask," he said, his voice shaky, "but I'm in a really tight spot. I just need $15,000 to get the bank off my back." I paid off his most urgent debts and lent him a total of $42,000, though he had yet to make more than token payments. All of this assistance was given quietly, without acknowledgement or gratitude. The more I helped, the more my family took it for granted that I would be there with my wallet open whenever they needed something. The financial dynamic had become increasingly toxic. My mother's calls followed a predictable pattern. She would start with brief disinterested questions about my life before sighing deeply and mentioning some financial predicament. "The roof is leaking again," she would say, her voice heavy with a theatrical sadness, "and your father says the quote is astronomical." Or, "Your father's prescription costs have gone up." She never directly asked for money, instead dropping heavy hints until I offered to help, allowing her to maintain the fiction that she had not asked. After accepting my assistance, she would quickly dismiss it with, "Well, that's what family is for," or "It's the least you can do considering all we did for you growing up." There was never a thank you. This Christmas, I decided things would be different. I would not sit quietly and accept disrespect. I spent hours selecting thoughtful, expensive gifts for everyone, wrapping them perfectly in silver and red paper, as if beautiful packaging could somehow make my family appreciate me. The day before Christmas, I received a call from David that would prove to be the final straw. His voice was frantic. The bank was threatening foreclosure if he didn't make a $15,000 payment by the end of the day. I agreed to transfer the money, adding it to the mental tally of funds that would likely never be repaid. After hanging up, I called Chloe, who listened patiently before bluntly telling me to stop being their ATM. Maybe facing real consequences would force him to make better choices, she countered. You're enabling them. Her words, along with James's advice, solidified my resolve. I was done shrinking myself to fit into a role they had assigned me. I arrived at my parents' home on Christmas Day, my trunk filled with gifts. My mother greeted me with her usual critical gaze and a comment about me being 10 minutes late. Eleanor, it's Christmas, my father muttered, but his words were lost in the noise of the family. The next hour was a whirlwind of strained greetings and forced conversation. I was seated at the far end of the dining table, across from my mother, a placement that symbolized my outsider status. Conversation flowed around me, focused on David's sales territory and Rachel's children's accomplishments. My Aiden just scored a perfect grade on his algebra final, Rachel said, her eyes shining. He's going to be a genius. David launched into a long-winded story about a big deal he just closed, making it sound like a grand triumph. I knew the truth, of course, that the big deal was a temporary fix, a band-aid over his deeper financial issues. When I finally shared that my studio had been featured in a prestigious design magazine, my mother dismissed it, saying, "Oh, is that one of those online magazines?" I corrected her, mentioning the print circulation and the $200,000 contract that came with our work. My mother's expression hardened. She put down her fork with a sharp clink against the china plate. There's no need to exaggerate, Clara. We all know graphic design is just a step above making posters for school events. I held my ground, my voice steady. My business employs 7 people and generates over $500,000 in annual revenue, Mom. That's not a hobby. She leaned in, her voice cutting. If you're doing so well, why are you not married with a family like your sister? Success is not just about money, Clara. It's about building a real life. You have always been our dreamer. The truth is, you are the most useless child we have. The words hung in the air, a final, cruel verdict. Something broke inside me, but it was not my spirit. It was the last, fragile thread of hope I had held on to. I stood up, my voice steady and clear, a strength I didn't know I had. Then stop calling me when you need money. The silence was absolute. My mother's face drained of color, her mouth a tight line of shock and fury. I was not done. Let me tell you all what useless looks like, I continued, my gaze sweeping the table. Useless is not the person who has built a successful business from nothing. Useless is not the person who paid for Dad's car repairs, or half of Lily's tuition, or saved your house from foreclosure 3 separate times, David. $15,000 just yesterday, remember? The truth about David's financial situation rippled through the room, a shockwave. My mother's shock turned to white-hot anger. You have no right to air our private business like this, she spat. If you help the family financially, that's what family does. No, Mom, I replied, what family does is support each other emotionally as well as financially. What family does is see each other as we really are. My father half rose from his chair, his expressions a mix of confusion and alarm. Clara, I had no idea, he said quietly, his gaze on David. Your mother told me those things were covered by savings. I walked away from the table, my father trying to stop me in the hallway. I left, feeling not regret or anger, but a profound sense of freedom. I got into my car, the cold Chicago air shocked to my lungs, and drove, a new path stretching out before me, aftermath and the path to healing over the next few weeks. I maintained my distance. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Rivera, who helped me understand that my confrontation had not created the dysfunction, but merely exposed it. You didn't break the rules, she said. You just stopped playing the game. I established clear boundaries. My mother remained resistant to change, her phone calls a mixture of bitter accusations and passive-aggressive complaints, but I held firm. But incremental shifts began to occur with my other family members. David, facing his financial reality without my safety net, began to make real changes. He found a new job, a more stable one, and started seeing a financial planner. He called me weeks later, not to ask for money, but to thank me, his voice a quiet mix of shame and gratitude. Rachel and I, for the first time in our lives, began to develop a genuine friendship. We started having regular phone calls that weren't just about her kids, but about our own lives, our struggles, and our hopes. Lily returned to school with a new determination, and she called me to ask for advice on her graphic design portfolio, a sign of her newfound respect. My father, the most transformed by the events, began to stand up to my mother and became one of my most vocal supporters. He called me regularly just to talk, to share small jokes, to ask about my life. He visited my studio one afternoon, meeting James, and seemed genuinely interested in my work and the people I employed. "You built something beautiful, Clara," he said, his eyes misting over with a pride I had never seen before. The most profound change, however, was internal. I no longer measured my worth by my family's approval. I learned that real love does not require you to diminish yourself. The following Christmas, I decided to go back, but with crucial differences. I stayed at a hotel and brought James. The atmosphere was noticeably different, awkward, but not hostile. The seating arrangement was still the same, but this time, it felt less like a punishment and more like a simple seating choice. My mother surprised me by asking me to help her in the kitchen, and there, as she kneaded dough for her famous rolls, she made a small but significant confession. She had started seeing a therapist and was trying to understand why she had needed everyone to fit into certain roles. It wasn't an apology, but it was unprecedented. "I think I was just so afraid of failure," she admitted quietly, not looking at me. "I thought if everyone was perfect, I would be too." She even expressed interest in seeing my studio the next day. As I sat at the dinner table that Christmas, looking at the faces of my family, I felt a profound sense of peace. We were not perfect, but we were trying to create something healthier than what we had before. In that moment, I understood that sometimes you must risk losing family as you have known it to gain family as it could be. The journey had never really been about gaining their approval, but about claiming my own worth and standing firmly in the knowledge of who I was. I had found my own family, one of my own making, and the love I had always sought had been inside me all along.